Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your submitted sources and pull out the most fascinating and important knowledge.
hmm
Today, you shared some really intriguing excerpts from Aryeh Kaplan's Meditation and Kabbalah, and that's what we're zeroing in on.
Sounds good.
If you're looking to quickly grasp the core ideas of Kabbalistic meditation without getting bogged down, in excessive detail, you're definitely in the right place.
Yeah, it can be dense stuff otherwise.
Exactly. These ancient texts hint at some truly profound and, well, often hidden practices, and our mission is to unpack the key historical context, the different approaches, and the major figures that shaped this tradition.
Right. A lot to cover.
Okay, let's dive in.
So what's fascinating right from the start
Yeah.
in Kaplan's intro is this initial hesitation around publishing Kabbalistic mysteries, especially in English.
Right.
What's crucial to understand here is that this wasn't just like another spiritual discipline. It was considered a deeply guarded body of knowledge. The fact that there was even a question of whether to commit it to writing,
Right.
well, that just underscores its esoteric nature.
Right. It makes you wonder about the weight of that decision. But then you see the rationale. The sheer amount of misinformation circulating actually compelled respected Kabbalistic masters to approve authentic accounts.
Exactly. The key insight here is that sometimes, to combat falsehood, you need to bring the truth into the light, even if it was once closely held.
Yeah, makes sense. And that leads us directly to Kaplan's vital distinction between theoretical and practical Kabbalah.
Yes, this is a fundamental division. Practical Kabbalah, as Kaplan outlines, sounds almost like, well, applied spiritual technology. It involves using divine names, incantations, amulets, even astrological considerations. What's crucial to understand is that this wasn't purely abstract study. It was about actively engaging with the spiritual world.
Okay.
Interestingly, theoretical Kabbalists, especially those following the teachings of the Ari, often viewed practical Kabbalah with suspicion, even considering it dangerous.
Dangerous in what way? It almost sounds like a difference in philosophical approaches, the scholars versus those who sought tangible results.
Well, the concern wasn't simply academic. The key insight seems to be that these powerful techniques could be easily misused without the necessary spiritual maturity and understanding.
Oh, okay.
There's a fear that individuals might pursue personal gain or exert undue influence rather than focusing on genuine spiritual growth.
Right.
This might explain why surviving texts on practical Kabbalah are relatively scarce, mostly existing as manuscripts passed down within select circles.
And it wasn't just the practical side that was shrouded in secrecy, was it? Even when discussing the more experiential aspects like meditation, there was a strong sense of concealment. The example Kaplan provides from Sherry Kedusha is really telling.
Absolutely. The fact that the publisher of Sherry Kedusha in 1715 actually omitted the entire fourth section, arguably the heart of the work, containing specific meditation instruction, because it dealt with divine names, permutations, and concealed mysteries, is pretty significant.
Yeah.
What's crucial to understand is that the techniques themselves, not just the names, were deemed too potent and potentially misunderstood for general consumption. This really highlights the intensely esoteric nature of these meditative practices.
It's like peeling back layers of hidden knowledge. And then you have the Ari system of Yichudim, these meditative unifications. Kaplan mentions that even though the Ari lived in the 16th century, his writings detailing these practices, especially in Shar Ruach HaKodesh, weren't printed until 1863, over 300 years later.
Yeah.
That incredible delay makes you wonder about the level of secrecy surrounding these teachings, doesn't it?
It truly underscores the immense caution and perhaps even the limitations on disseminating such profound experiential knowledge. For centuries, it largely remained within restricted scholarly lineages, transmitted through handwritten documents.
Right.
So when we delve into Kabbalistic meditation, we're engaging with a tradition that was intentionally veiled for a very considerable period.
So where do we find the earliest glimmers of these meditative practices? Kaplan takes us way back to the 1st century Talmudic period, doesn't he?
He does. He points to this era as holding the earliest direct mentions. What's fascinating here is that these great Talmudists, figures we primarily associate with legal and textual scholarship, were also deeply involved in mystical arts, utilizing meditative techniques for spiritual ascent. It suggests a more holistic spiritual practice in those early times.
Repetition of divine names and intense focus on transcendental realms, it sounds like some really powerful methods. What do we know about their specific techniques? It seems like much of that knowledge hasn't survived.
Sadly, yeah, our understanding is fragmented. It's pieced together from scattered references and one complete text, Hekalat Rabbatai, which Kaplan notes is being translated in his book.
Okay.
The Hekkelot literature provides glimpses into these early mystical journeys, often describing ascensions through heavenly chambers and encounters with divine beings. It offers a tantalizing hint of the rich meditative practices of that era.
It's almost like an early form of Kabbalah taking shape. But then Kaplan explains how the publication of the Zohar in the late 1290s largely overshadowed these earlier mystical traditions.
Precisely. The Zohar, with its incredibly rich symbolism and intricate cosmological framework, really captivated the minds of most Kabbalists.
Right.
It became the central text, and the teachings of earlier schools were, to a significant extent, forgotten or, relegated to the background. This is the key reason why many pre-Zohar works were never widely published and remain in manuscript form even today.
And ironically, despite the Zohar's profound depth, Kaplan notes that it doesn't delve into meditative methods in great detail. So the focus for many Kabbalists shifted from active practice towards interpreting the Zohar's complex symbolism.
That's a crucial point. While the Zohar provides an incredibly deep theoretical foundation for Kabbah, it doesn't offer, a practical manual for meditation. However, as Kaplan reminds us, there were exceptions, dedicated Kabbalists, who continued to employ the meditative techniques of figures like Abulafia, Gikatalia, and Isaac of Acco. But for a period, the emphasis seems to have been more on understanding the Zohar's teachings than on actively practicing specific meditative disciplines.
It's like being given an amazing map, but then spending all your time just studying the map instead of actually embarking on the journey it describes.
Exactly. That's a great analogy.
But then Kaplan brings us forward to the 18th century and the rise of the Hasidic movement, which he describes as Renaissance.
And it truly represented a revival. The Baal Shem Tov and his early disciples had a deep connection to these older meditative texts.
Okay.
When you examine their writings, you can see how they frequently drew upon and reinterpreted these earlier Kabbalistic techniques. So the Hasidic movement brought a renewed emphasis to the practical, experiential dimension of Kabbalah, including meditation, making it more accessible and integrated into spiritual life.
And Kaplan mentions that in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, there was a resurgence of individuals actively practicing these classical meditative techniques, even documenting the spiritual states they attained. It sounds like a real flourishing of practical Kabbalah during that time.
Yes, it was a period of significant spiritual exploration and a direct continuation of these ancient practices within a new social and religious context.
Now, Kaplan starts to categorize the different approaches to meditation within Kabbalah. He outlines 3 fundamental methods based on the primary faculty employed: intellect, emotions, and body. Let's begin with intellectual meditation. What does that involve?
Okay, so intellectual meditation, as Kaplan explains, was particularly favored by theoretical Kabbalists. It involved deep and sustained contemplation on the Torah, seeking the inner meaning of its commandments and intellectually exploring the intricate structure of the supernal realms.
Right.
The aim was almost to intellectually map the divine architecture as a path to understanding.
And he links this to ecstasy and the Chabad school of Hasidism. How did that connection form?
Well, for those deeply engaged in this intellectual delving, it often led to profound states of ecstatic insight. The Chabad school of Hasidism, known for its emphasis on intellect and comprehension in spiritual practice, really built its foundation on this method of rigorous intellectual contemplation as a primary avenue for connecting with the divine.
Then there's another form of intellectual meditation. He mentions the study of devotional works for self-improvement, which formed the basis of the Musar movement in the 19th century. And he specifically highlights Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzato's Mesilat Yesharim, or Path of the Just.
Ah, yes, Mesilat Yesharim, a pivotal text in this context. Rabbi Luzzatto lays out a systematic path towards spiritual refinement, though he deliberately stops short of fully describing the level of Ruach HaKodesh, or Holy Spirit. The core method he emphasizes is Hitbodedut, which means deep contemplation on the ethical and spiritual teachings presented at each stage, followed by active effort to integrate those teachings into one's life. What's particularly insightful is Kaplan's observation that the 10 stages outlined in the book clearly parallel the 10 Sefirot, suggesting a structured ascent through the divine attributes.
So it's not just abstract intellectualism. It's about taking that understanding and applying it to one's own moral and spiritual development.
Right.
Now, what about emotional meditation? How does that fit into the Kabbalistic framework?
Emotional meditation, or Kavanah, centers on intention and focused concentration, especially within the context of the prescribed daily prayers.
Okay.
Kaplan highlights its significance within Hasidic schools, where the goal is to fully infuse the words of prayer with genuine feeling and emotion, achieving a state of divestment of the physical. It's about transforming prayer from a rote recitation into a deeply personal and heartfelt communion.
It sounds like a way to truly connect with the spiritual significance of the words being uttered. He also mentions meditations involving music, which held importance for the ancient prophets. That makes perfect sense. Music has such a powerful and direct way of evoking emotions.
Absolutely. Music can bypass the purely rational mind and directly access our emotional and spiritual centers, making it a potent catalyst for entering meditative states and experiencing deeper connection.
And finally, we have physical meditation. What does that entail within Kabbalah?
Physical meditation in this tradition isn't primarily about specific bodily postures or movements like you might think. Instead, it encompasses techniques like self-seclusion, known as Hitbodedut.
Hitbodedut. Okay.
Rabbi Isaac of Acco defines it as a process of nullifying the senses and separating thought from all external perception, essentially enclothing the soul in its pure spiritual essence.
So it's about intentionally minimizing external sensory input to facilitate a deeper inward focus. Rabbi Abraham Maimonides seems to have elaborated on this idea with his distinction between external and internal hitbodedut, right?
Precisely. External Hitbodedut is simply the act of physically isolating oneself in a quiet environment conducive to contemplation. Pretty straightforward. However, internal Hitbodedut is the more profound aspect. It involves isolating the soul from its own perceptive faculties, quieting the internal mental chatter to become truly receptive to the subtle whispers of the spiritual realm.
It sounds like a very challenging but potentially transformative practice of radical inner stillness. Now let's delve into Merkava meditation. This sounds particularly shrouded in mystery. Kaplan notes that it often involved the use of divine names.
Yes, Merkava or chariot meditation represents one of the earliest and most potent forms of Jewish mysticism, drawing its inspiration from the prophetic visions of Ezekiel.
Right.
It's fundamentally about undertaking an inner journey through the celestial realms to directly experience the divine presence. The use of specific divine names was central to this practice, but even as early as the 1st century BCE, as we see in the Hillel's teachings, there were strong cautions against using these sacred names for personal gain. What's crucial to understand is the reverence and responsibility associated with these powerful tools.
It's a clear reminder that these were not seen as magical incantations, but as sacred keys that required the utmost respect. Kaplan connects Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and his disciples to the Merkava tradition.
Right. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was a pivotal figure in Jewish history after the Second Temple's destruction. He, along with his prominent disciples like Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Joshua, and Rabbi Eleazar ben Arak, were deeply immersed in the esoteric knowledge of the Merkava.
Okay.
Rabbi Jonathan ben Uziel, often regarded as a master mystic, is also credited with authoring the Aramaic translation of the prophets, the Targum, a work said to have been accompanied by a powerful earthquake and a heavenly voice. These figures were deeply engaged in these mystical explorations.
The image of an earthquake and a divine voice accompanying the writing of the Targum really emphasizes the immense power associated with these teachings. And then you have Rabbi Akiba's remarkable experience of synesthesia, saw the voices, heard visions, which Kaplan interprets as an indication of reaching profound meditative states.
Exactly. Synesthesia, this fascinating blending of sensory perceptions, is often reported in deep meditative states. Rabbi Akiba's articulation of this experience strongly suggests he had attained exceptionally high levels of consciousness through these intensive practices.
Kaplan also includes this vivid account from Rabbi Nathan ben Yechiel describing the ascent through the 7 chambers of the Merkava and the encounters with celestial guardians. It almost sounds like navigating a spiritual labyrinth.
It does indeed. These narratives depict a step-by-step journey through different levels of the heavens, each guarded by specific gatekeepers or angelic beings. Rabbi Nathan's description of fasting, placing his head between his knees and whispering praises to gain access. It provides a powerful illustration of the intensity and ritual involved.
And there were inherent dangers in these practices, weren't there? Kaplan specifically mentions the guardians of the 6th chamber attacking those who attempted to descend without the proper authorization. That sounds quite perilous.
Oh yes, the Merkava tradition placed a strong emphasis on the necessity of proper preparation, spiritual purity, and being a screened and initiated member of a mystical community before even attempting such things.
Right.
Rabbi Ishmael's teachings underscore the importance of qualified individuals undertaking these practices and the potential risks for those who weren't adequately prepared. The specific seals and divine names associated with entering each chamber, like Kutraye and Suraya. It highlights the precise and potentially hazardous nature of these mystical journeys.
It's clear this was not a path to be taken lightly. Now let's turn our attention to the unique teachings of Abraham Abulafia. Kaplan points out that despite initial expectations that his work would be forgotten, Abulafia's ideas were actually referenced and quoted by major Kabbalists. That's a surprising turn of events.
It is quite remarkable. Influential figures like the Ramak, Rabbi Chaim Vital, and the Radbaz, while perhaps initially cautious, ultimately recognized the significance and value within Abulafia's distinct approach, especially his emphasis on the meditative use of divine names and his specific letter permutation techniques.
Born in 1240, a year marking a new millennium in the Hebrew calendar, Kaplan mentions Abulafia himself saw this as a sign of a special mission. What was so distinctive about his teachings?
Abulafia, who attracted notable disciples like Rabbi Joseph Kikatalia, developed a system he termed the Kabbalah of letters, which he carefully distinguished from the more prevalent Kabbalah of Sefirot.
Okay, letters versus Sefirot.
Right. His method placed a strong emphasis on the meditative practices of writing and permuting the Hebrew alphabet, drawing inspiration from the Sefer Yetzirah's account of creation through letters and Abraham's attainment of prophetic insight. He considered this the primary path to prophetic experience.
Permutation of letters as a core meditative practice. That's a fascinating concept. He even draws a connection to Bezalel's divinely inspired ability to construct the tabernacle by permuting the letters of creation.
Exactly. Abulafia viewed this manipulation of the Hebrew letters as a way to tap into the very fundamental building blocks of reality, the spiritual DNA of the universe, so to speak. He even found support for this in the biblical verse. God's word is permuted, interpreting the Hebrew word serufa in the sense of blended or permuted, aligning it with the principles in Sefer Yetzirah. He also saw this practice as a form of inner examination and refinement for the meditator.
Interesting.
Revealing aspects of their own soul through how they interacted with the letters. He also mentions using the blue thread, the chalazon dye, as an object for meditative contemplation to attain vision.
He seemed to have issued some strong warnings against those who might approach these spiritual practices without sufficient seriousness, didn't he?
Absolutely. Abulafia cautioned that entering these profound mysteries without adequate intellectual grounding and spiritual preparation could lead to confusion, the unchecked proliferation of imagination, and even genuine spiritual harm. He stressed the importance of first developing a solid intellectual understanding of Kabbalistic principles before attempting these advanced techniques.
Yet he also believed that at the highest levels of meditative attainment, one could potentially influence or even alter the natural order. However, he strongly opposed using these potential powers for mere magical purposes, emphasizing that the ultimate goal should always be spiritual enlightenment.
That's a crucial distinction. While acknowledging the latent potential for wielding spiritual forces, Abulafia consistently directed his followers towards the pursuit of deeper spiritual understanding and a direct connection with the divine, rather than seeking magical abilities for their own sake or for worldly advantage.
Kaplan then delves into the specifics of Abulafia's methods of letter permutation, referencing his key works, Otsar Eden Haganuz and Sefer Hatzruf. What were some of the core techniques he advocated?
The core techniques involved a multisensory approach. Writing down Hebrew letters, vocalizing them, listening to their sounds, and mentally manipulating them in various combinations to discover words that shared the same numerical value, or gematria.
Gematria, right.
This shared value was seen as a key to unlocking deeper layers of wisdom. He also emphasized the precise pronunciation of vowels, accompanied by specific head movements and regulated breathing exercises, as detailed in The Light of the Intellect. The ultimate aim was to facilitate a profound joining of one's individual consciousness with the universal mind of God through focused meditation on his holy names.
And he specifically advocated meditation on the powerful name of 72, derived from those 3 consecutive verses in Exodus.
Yes, Abulafia provided a detailed method for constructing this highly revered name and stressed the importance of using the natural vowels associated with each letter. He also outlined specific preparatory steps: purifying one's thoughts, wearing talit and tefillin, donning clean white garments, even forming a mental image of God and the angelic hosts.
Wow, quite involved.
Meditation on significant divine names like Shaddai, which he equated with the archangel Metatron, was also central.
The detailed instructions for the head movements associated with the different vowel pronunciations, that's a very embodied and physical form of meditation.
It is. The specific head inclinations for the Kemetz, Sereh, and Shirik added a physical dimension, grounding the spiritual practice in the body. And despite these intense methods, Abulafia clarified that Hitbodedut in his system could lead to profound experiences of light, but not necessarily seeing one's own image.
Okay.
Albertini, a later Kabbalist influenced by Abulafia, even proposed that any legitimate teaching could serve as a subject for meditation, with the goal of quieting the surface faculties to allow a deeper, hidden intellect to emerge.
It seems the focused use of divine names was viewed as a way to channel incredibly potent spiritual forces, with Albertini even referencing the examples of Moses and the 10 martyrs as demonstrations of this power.
Precisely. The underlying belief was that these divine names contained immense spiritual energy that could be accessed and directed through concentrated meditative practice.
Now, Kaplan shifts our attention to Rabbi Moshe de Leon and the pivotal role of the Zohar. He discusses these 4 manifestations of hidden, radiant light, the Zohar itself and the surrounding Noga. What is the significance of these concepts?
Rabbi Moshe de Leon, strongly linked to the Zohar's emergence, describes these as emanations from God's hidden, unknowable essence. The different categories Bahir, Zohar, Muvak, and the light that receives Zohar represent distinct levels or ways this primordial divine light manifests. He emphasizes a fundamental principle. All physical light is ultimately derived from and sustained by this more subtle spiritual light.
And this hidden, concealed light is what Moses yearned to perceive when he implored, "Show me your glory."
Yes, this unmanifested light is considered the very source of all the visible divine emanations. De Leon uses the analogy of a candle-dark base, brilliant flame, to illustrate how these seemingly disparate aspects are essentially one unified mystery, one indivisible light.
It's intriguing that despite the central role of the 10 Sefirot in the broader Kabbalistic system, Kaplan points out that they don't appear to have held a particularly prominent place in the earliest forms of Kabbalistic meditation.
That's a surprising observation, isn't it? While there are hints that early Kabbalists might have contemplated the Sefirot as a kind of ladder for spiritual ascent, the earliest meditative literature largely focuses on other practices. The primary emphasis seems to have been on direct engagement with holy names received through prophetic transmission.
These holy names, 72, 42, 12, they were understood to be potent for miracles and not generally used for personal needs, only in moments of great communal necessity.
That's the prevailing tradition. These powerful names were regarded as supremely sacred, reserved for averting significant evil decrees or for acts sanctifying God's name, not for fulfilling individual desires.
Right.
To access the power for one's own needs, Kaplan explains, deep study of the Torah to grasp their meaning was essential.
And then the meditative process involved focusing intently on the specific name associated with the need and consciously elevating that concentration through the hierarchy of the 10 Sefirot until it reached the ultimate source of all desire. It's almost like a spiritual request traveling through a structured cosmic network.
Precisely. Connecting your specific human need with the ultimate origin of fulfillment. Kaplan also touches upon the mystery of the blessing conveyed through Amen, linking it to the flow from Ehayan, YHVH, down to Adonai, which is Melkut.
And the importance of unifying the Sefirah within prayer, ascending from desire to desire until reaching the infinite Ein Sof, that sounds like the ultimate aim of Kabbalistic prayer.
It is indeed. Even the subtle differences in pronouncing YHVH and Adonai, YHVH versus YHVH, Adonai carry meaning, representing ascent into unification, or the descent of divine influence. The very pronunciation of YHVH, Kaplan notes, was believed to agitate all universes, potentially bringing one's sins to remembrance.
And he mentions that the Sephira of Chokmah, wisdom, is even referred to as fear due to its immense depth-confounding thought, echoing the Sefer Yetzirah's close your mouth, heart, a powerful reminder of the awe required.
Exactly. The sheer immensity of Chokmah is considered beyond our full grasp, hence its association with fear, recognizing our limitations when facing infinite divine wisdom.
Kaplan then introduces Rabbi Isaac of Acco, a contemporary of Abulafia and Gettitalia, renowned for letter permutations. His teachings on meditative principles seem to have significantly influenced later Kabbalists.
Rabbi Isaac of Acco was indeed pivotal. He strongly emphasized Hitbodedut, usually translated as equanimity or stoicism, a state of complete indifference to external influences, positive or negative, as a fundamental prerequisite for true meditation.
Equanimity.
Interestingly, as Kaplan points out, this concept traces back to earlier ethical works like Chovat Halavava and even the Talmud.
This idea of hishtavit, inner detachment, as essential for spiritual radiance, it's fascinating. It predates later Kabbalah. The Baal Shem Tov even interpreted Shiviti Hashem Lenegdi Tamid, I have set the Lord always before me, as meaning, I have been stoic.
Yes, the Baal Shem Tov saw this unwavering equanimity as crucial for maintaining constant spiritual focus, keeping God ever present by remaining undisturbed by the world's fluctuations. Rabbi Isaac also outlined 3 key traits: finding joy in one's portion, loving meditation, and fleeing from position and honor.
And he believed cultivating genuine humility could lead to the divine presence resting upon an individual, allowing them to learn directly from God's Spirit. The Baal Shem Tov echoed this regarding insults and praise treat them equally to weaken the evil inclination.
Precisely. Inner stillness and detachment from external validation were seen as vital for opening oneself to divine wisdom and transcending negative impulses.
The section detailing Rabbi Isaac's investigation into the Zohar's authenticity reads like a captivating historical detective story.
Doesn't it?
His meeting with Rabbi Moshe de Leon, the conflicting testimony from the widow, the ingenious test with the lost folio, it adds to the Zohar's mystique.
It truly does. Rabbi Isaac's determined effort to uncover the truth underscores the importance of authenticity and tradition within Kabbalah. The conflicting accounts and the clever test raise intriguing questions that still fascinate scholars.
So, following these foundational figures, what were some key developments leading up to the Ari? Kaplan mentions the Ramak's Jerushan method and Rabbi Judah Albertini's connection to Abulafia.
Right. Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, the Ramak, used a technique called Jerushan, roughly divorce or separation. It involved gaining insight through intense contemplation of scripture, possibly repetitive recitation like a mantra. Rabbi Judah Albertini, a significant transmitter of Abulafia's methods, being a contemporary of the Radbaz, suggests a likely channel for those techniques.
And then the Radbaz, Rabbi David ibn Zimra, along with Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi, played a crucial role in introducing the Ari's teachings.
Yes, these influential figures were instrumental in bringing the Ari's complex system to greater prominence. Also, Rabbi Joseph Taitetzak, known for ascetic practices, had a disciple, Rabbi Shlomo Alkabatz, author of Lecce, who initiated the Ramak into deeper mysteries.
The Ramak's magnum opus, Pardes Ramonim, Kaplan describes it as a systematization, reconciling earlier schools with the Zohar. Sounds like a monumental achievement.
It was. The Pardes provided a comprehensive framework, demonstrating unity between seemingly disparate schools and offering a robust philosophical foundation. The Ramak also taught ascending through the Sefirot, using divine names echoing Jigatalia, aiming for greater unification.
He also mentions using colors associated with Sefirot in meditation and amulets, white for cheese love, red for judgment. That's very visual.
Exactly. Colors linked to Sefirot energetics. Utilized in meditation and amulets to channel specific energies, the Ramak viewed thought as unifying the attributes, connecting back to Ein Sof. He advocated meditating on the 10 God names associated with the Sefirot for safe ascent.
And then we arrive at Rabbi Chaim Vital, absolutely crucial in disseminating the Sari's complex teachings, especially given their short time together. His Shari Kedusha sounds indispensable.
Chaim Vital was indeed the primary vessel. Despite less than 2 years with the Ari, he meticulously documented vast teachings in Shari Kedusha. Kaplan notes Vital's earlier affiliations caused the Ari initial concern. The fascinating anecdote about Vital drinking from Miriam's well and suddenly grasping the Ari's teachings highlights a moment of profound spiritual insight.
Like divinely inspired illumination. Kaplan also brings in the Mishnah's central role, connecting it to Kabbalistic practice. He mentions Rabbi Judah, the Prince's compilation, and Rabbi Joseph Caro's Maggid linked to intense Mishnah study.
The Mishnah, the earliest written oral Torah, held immense authority. Rabbi Joseph Caro's mystical experiences with his angelic guide, or Maggid, were attributed to deep immersion in Mishnah study, suggesting repetitive engagement could induce meditative states. Rabbi Chaim Vital also used this method.
And this seems to echo the Ramak's Jerushan method, repetitive contemplation leading to deeper understanding. Kaplan also points out detailed instructions for Yichudim, unifications, in Shorei Kedusha, drawing parallels to Abulafia's descriptions in Chaya Olam Haba.
Yes, the Yichudim, aimed at spiritual unification, were central to the Ari's teachings, detailed in Shorei Kedusha. Parallels with Abulafia's descriptions of letters manifesting as forms or angels underscore a shared mystical understanding of language's power. Kaplan outlines 4 aspects of enlightenment: proper observance, Torah study, piety leading to Elijah's revelation, and revelation of a deceased saint's soul.
The instructions for Yechudim sound incredibly focused. Closing eyes, divesting from worldly thoughts, yearning for supernal realms, attaching consciousness to the soul's root and supernal lights, imagining ascent, intending to transmit light and sustenance. Very structured inner work.
It is highly deliberate, intensely focused practice, aiming to connect with higher dimensions and facilitate the flow of divine energy and blessing.
Kaplan really emphasizes the Aryeh's profound impact, calling him a human angel. His teachings elevated the Zohar's level, even influencing legal rulings.
The Aryeh's exceptional brilliance and mastery of Talmud and Kabbalah were legendary. Accounts of nightly soul ascents to heavenly academies, learning from figures like Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, Rabbi Akiba, and prophets, speak to his extraordinary stature. The tradition of Elijah revealing himself to exceptional individuals, teaching Kabbalah, as Recanati recounted, reinforces this perception.
And the Aryeh expanded Kabbalistic cosmology with Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, and its 4 levels: Ab, Sag, Ma, Ben, manifesting in the Tetragrammaton and lower parts of him. A complex, layered understanding.
Yes, the Aryeh system provided a much more detailed, intricate understanding of divine emanation. Chaim Tal's personal accounts of Yechudim in Abay's cave, encountering Atika Kadisha and intertwining YHVH and Adonai, offer rare glimpses into these advanced, sometimes overwhelming practices. His encounter with Benaiah ben Yehoiada's soul further illustrates connecting with spiritual figures.
Kaplan also discusses different levels of Magadim, angelic messengers, created from different universes, Asiya, Yetzirah, Beria, based on actions, study, and meditation, and specific criteria for discerning a genuine Magid.
The Magid's origin, Elizia, action, Yetzirah, formation, or Beria, creation, determined its nature and reliability. The Aryeh provided guidelines: consistency in truth, encouraging righteousness, prophetic accuracy, elucidating Torah's secrets.
In the nature of prophetic voice, Kaplan explains it as an earlier voice created through deeds, clothing itself in the individual's physical voice. He also notes prophecy from the male aspect, Ruach HaKodesh from the female, very nuanced.
It highlights the profound link between our spiritual development and capacity for divine inspiration, suggesting our actions create a vessel for higher wisdom.
Kaplan then gives specific Yechudim examples involving Adonai and Ea in Asiya, and outlines practices conducive to Ruach HaKodesh: observing Sabbath, awe in synagogue, Kavanaugh and blessings, midnight Psalm 119 with MNT's PKH meditation, meditating on tefillin parchments, consistent daily study, a comprehensive approach.
These specific practices were understood as powerful means of purification, refining the inner state, creating conditions for Ruach HaKodesh. Each act, with focused intention, contributes to spiritual refinement.
The concept of entrusting the soul, nightly spiritual ascent, and meditating on binding one's soul with the saints, at their grave or home, and with Adam to gain knowledge and answers, speaks a deep soul interconnectedness.
These practices reflect profound belief in soul interconnectedness and potential to draw wisdom from the righteous, living or deceased. Meditations elevating a saint's soul via feminine water and binding one's nefesh, ruach, neshama, required intense concentration.
And the Zohar's teachings on a saint's soul's resting places, nefesh in grave, ruach in Eden, neshama under throne of glory, varying based on origin in absolute levels, a complex afterlife map.
Underscores that even after death, the soul retains aspects residing in distinct realms, corresponding to spiritual attainment during life.
Kaplan also mentions specific meditations on divine names, like YAG expanded with yods, and using guttural palatal letters for drawing down energy, plus meditating on Zer Anpin's loves for ascent. Highly specific techniques.
These detailed practices highlight the intricate relationship perceived between the Hebrew alphabet, divine name permutations, and spiritual realms architecture. Precise tools for connecting with and drawing down specific divine energies.
The rise of the Hasidic movement, embracing Kabbalah, profoundly influencing Jewish life, it brought esoteric concepts to a wider audience.
The Hasidic movement played a pivotal role in democratizing Kabbalah, making core concepts and certain practices more accessible, integrating them into daily life and worship.
Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz's discussion of magic squares relating to creation is interesting, and their use in Kabbalistic meditation, numbers representing spiritual lights, for elevating through Sefirot, like the Keter square.
Magic squares beyond math were viewed as symbolic representations of spiritual structures, a visual, numerical framework for meditative ascent through the Sefirot.
Finally, Kaplan touches on various Hasidic teachings, Expansion of the divine presence leading to involuntary speech, constricted versus expansive consciousness in worship, praying for the heaviness of the head, lack of divine presence, not just personal needs, elevating stray thoughts via love and fear, investing full strength in prayer words. A very internalized approach.
These Hasidic insights emphasize inner experience, focusing on self-nullification, intentionality, awareness of soul-divine interconnectedness. Where one's thoughts are, that is where all of him is. Powerfully underscores focused mental activity's potential.
And then we have Rabbi Nachman of Breslov and his distinctive emphasis on Hitbodedut, mental self-seclusion, inner-directed meditation, often via spontaneous prayer. He saw it as a powerful path, accessible to everyone.
Rabbi Nachman brought a unique dimension to Hitbodedut, emphasizing solitary, heartfelt prayer, uninhibited expression of inner thoughts, feelings to God. He considered it the foundation of holiness, repentance, available to all. Even inability to speak could become profound, silent prayer.
He even drew fascinating connections between mind levels, thinker, thought, speech, and the universes. Yetzirah, speech, Beriah thought, Atzilut, nothingness wisdom. He saw nothingness, Heil, as the essence binding thinker to thought. Attaining nothingness leads to realizing God's constant creation.
Rabbi Nachman's teachings delve into profound philosophy, drawing parallels between consciousness and divine emanations. Nothingness signifies ego nullification, recognizing dependence, opening to God's creative flow. Torah and mitzvot bind our finite somethingness to infinite divine nothingness.
And he taught fear of God leads to ego nullification, attachment to nothingness, allowing sustenance to flow, a powerful concept of surrender.
Yes, profound reverence and surrender are seen as essential for connecting with the source and receiving blessing. Rabbi Nachman's life, birth during opposition, moved to Breslov, disciple Rabbi Nathan Likutei Moharan, Ukraine journey, interactions passing in Uman all contribute to his teaching's enduring power.
Wow. This deep dive into Aryeh Kaplan's excerpts has truly unveiled a vast and incredibly intricate landscape of Kabbalistic meditation. We've explored its historical roots, diverse methodologies, intellect, emotion, body enigmatic Merkava practices, unique contributions of figures like Abulafia and the Ari, and later Hasidic evolution, culminating in Rabbi Nachman's Hitbodedut.
It's truly remarkable how these ancient texts offer such a rich, multifaceted exploration of inner spiritual experience. We've seen recurring themes: secrecy, intellect-emotion interplay, detailed letter permutation and Yuchudim techniques, and the aspiration for deeper divine connection.
For me, some striking insights were the historical reasons for secrecy, the sheer diversity of meditative approaches, and the profound preparation and potential risks of practices like Merkava.
And hopefully, for you, our listener, this deep dive provided a solid foundation for further exploration. Many avenues to pursue specific figures, techniques, historical context.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder. Considering this vast array of ancient approaches to inner experience, which might resonate most with your own contemporary search for knowledge and understanding, perhaps Abulafia's letter meditations, the Ari's Yuchudim, or Rabbi Nachman's heartfelt prayer in Hitbodedut sparked curiosity. The journey inward, it seems, has been a deeply explored path for centuries.